Have you ever glanced at the last digit of your birth year and thought, just a number? A meaningless stamp, another formality for documents, IDs, and applications. But what if I told you that single digit, yes, the final number of the year you entered this world, holds a quiet, mystical code about your soul's deeper rhythm? Let's slow down for a moment. Picture this. You were born in 1987 or 1993, maybe 2001. That 7, that 3, or that 1 you've written countless times without thinking. That's not just a numerical footnote. It's a whisper, a pulse, a symbolic signature that has been quietly resonating throughout your life. Soft but steady, hidden yet constant, like the hum of a distant drumbeat that your heart instinctively knows, even if your mind never recognized it. We grow up thinking numbers are neutral, cold, emotionless facts to be calculated, filed, or memorized. But Carl Jung, one of the greatest psychological minds of the 20th century, didn't see numbers that way. To him, numbers were more than tools. They were living archetypes, timeless symbols rooted in the human unconscious. They appeared not only in math, but in mythology, dreams, and synchronicity. To Jung, a number could hold the same weight as a dream image or a recurring symbol in a story. It carried meaning, not just measurement. So here's the proposal. What if that last digit in your birth year is an echo of something ancient, a pattern, a subtle energy, a message from your inner world trying to break through the static? What if it reveals a deep psychological tendency or emotional frequency that has been shaping your choices, emotions, relationships, even your unspoken longings? Think of it like this. Your birth year is a timestamp, but the last digit, that's the punctuation mark, the exclamation, the comma, the ellipsis. It's the part that gives the sentence its tone. Maybe you've always felt pulled toward creativity, or responsibility, or solitude, and never quite knew why. Maybe that last digit is part of the pattern your unconscious has always been following. This isn't about fortune-telling or numerological determinism. It's not about boxing people into categories based on numbers. That's not what Jung believed. He didn't think life was rigid or linear. He saw it as symbolic, circular, poetic. The last digit of your birth year, in this lens, is not a definition. It's a mirror, a reflection that might just help you recognize something about yourself you've always sensed but never articulated. You see, each number, 0 through 9, had its own psychological temperature, a tone, or atmosphere. When you explore them not as facts, but as living energies, they start to reveal things. A 2 might speak to a life driven by emotional harmony. A 5 could signal inner restlessness and exploration. A 9 might suggest a longing to complete or transcend. You may wonder, isn't that a stretch? How can one number hold so much? But consider this. Language is made of symbols. So is art, religion, myth, even the structure of our psyche. So why not numbers? Why not the most overlooked, easily dismissed symbol of all, the last digit of your birth year? This tiny detail, one you've likely ignored, could be an ancient fingerprint left on your soul. And here's what makes it even more fascinating. You've carried this mark since the moment you were born. Every document, every ID card, every medical form, it's been there. But no one ever told you to look. No one ever said, hey, this isn't just a number, it might be a clue. Today we change that. We'll go deeper into each number in the coming sections, from 0 to 9, and unpack what each one might mean psychologically and symbolically. And again, this isn't dogma. You don't have to agree, but allow yourself to be curious, open, willing to ask the question, what if there's more to this than I thought? Because the moment we begin to see through symbolic eyes, everything changes. We stop seeing the world as purely rational. We begin to notice synchronicities, patterns, signs, and suddenly, even the smallest detail, like the last digit of your birth year, starts to shine with unexpected meaning. Carl Jung once said that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Perhaps this is your first step toward bringing a hidden piece of your story into the light, not to define you, but to remind you of something ancient, something deep, something you've known all along. Let's begin unlocking what each last digit may whisper to your soul. We'll start with the numbers, not as math, but as mirrors. Each digit from 0 to 9 isn't just a numeral, It's an emotional archetype, an inner rhythm, a psychic tone. The soul of the number 3. If the last digit of your birth year is 3, then you're walking through life with a soul drenched in creativity. This is the path of the translator of feeling, someone who doesn't just see the world, but absorbs it fully, through symbols, colors, tones, and moods. To be a 3 is to live on a frequency most people can't hear. You don't merely speak in words. You speak in gestures, in images, in metaphors. You translate the invisible into something others can feel. Music moves you, not just because of sound, but because of the way it mimics emotional landscapes. Stories linger in your bones. A glance, a scent, a flicker of light. Everything has the power to awaken something deep inside you. And even if you're soft-spoken, there's a magnetic pull about you. People sense that there's more beneath your surface, something vibrant and sacred. It's as if your presence carries a hum, a pulse of unspoken emotion that draws others in, even if they can't quite name what it is. But with this gift comes a shadow. To feel so deeply is both a blessing and a burden. You might find yourself jumping from one idea to the next, overflowing with visions and inspirations, unable to stay still, because stillness feels like a confrontation with a tidal wave of emotion. You wonder, if I stop creating, will I be consumed by what I feel? You live in motion because it helps you regulate the intensity within. But here's the quiet truth. Stillness is not your enemy. It's your wellspring. Silence, for you, isn't a void. It's a sacred space where your truest voice is born. When your expression is rooted in authenticity, not in the rush to be heard, but in the depth of being real. Your words don't just communicate, they illuminate. You weren't born to repeat what others say. You were born to name what others.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Your feedback means a lot, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts.
This cannot even grasp. You are the poet of emotion, the artist of feeling. When you stop fearing the quiet, you'll discover that your most powerful creations don't come from performance, but from presence. The soul of the number 4. If your birth year ends in 4, you are the foundation builder. 4 is the number of stability, of form, of long-term vision. Your soul is drawn to structure, not as limitation, but as a canvas. While others chase constant motion, you understand the quiet strength of staying. You're the kind of person who finds peace in predictability, not because you fear change, but because you know that depth comes from consistency. You value commitment. You take time to build things, whether it's relationships, homes, careers, or ideas. And when you build with care. Your soul doesn't rush. People may underestimate you because you're not always loud. You may not chase the spotlight, but when others burn out, you're still standing. Your strength lies in your ability to endure, to create stability in a world obsessed with change. But the shadow of 4 can be rigidity. You might cling too tightly to routine or resist what feels unfamiliar. You fear chaos not just because it's uncomfortable, but because it threatens what you've worked so hard to build. Yet growth lives at the edge of discomfort. Your journey isn't to abandon structure. It's to make sure the walls you build don't become your cage. Here's your gift. You have the power to make things last. When your foundation is flexible, not fixed. When you allow movement within your stability, you become the architect of things that endure. You're not just here to build buildings. You're here to build lives, ideas, and spaces where people can thrive. When a 4 finds balance between control and surrender, they become a force of grounded transformation. You remind the world that strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet decision to stay and shape what matters. Let's continue unlocking the soulful archetypes behind each final birth year digit. This time, with those who carry the 9, the soul of the number 9. If your birth year ends in 9, you are not just someone passing through this world. You're a wisdom keeper, a spiritual bridge between what is and what was, between endings and new beginnings. You were born under the frequency of completion, the final tone of a long song, the last chapter before the next book begins. From a young age, you likely carried a kind of emotional weight that others didn't. You may have felt like an old soul in a young body. You sense transitions before they arrive. You feel the impermanence of things, relationships, seasons, phases of life, and you've learned, sometimes painfully, that to love something fully means knowing how to let it go. You're drawn to stories of grief and rebirth. You're the friend others turn to during moments of crisis, not because you fix everything, but because you sit with them when the world gets too loud. You understand silence. You don't fear endings. In fact, you honor them. You know that every goodbye carries the seed of a beginning. Yet within this depth lies your shadow. Sometimes you hold on to pain longer than necessary. You replay past wounds in your mind, not out of bitterness, but because you haven't fully let them transform you. You over-identify with struggle. You find meaning in sacrifice, but forget that you're allowed to ask for help too. You feel strong when you carry others' burdens, but what happens when yours grow too heavy? The nine's journey is to release, to forgive, to dissolve the ego that clings. When you do, you become a lighthouse, a guide for those learning how to surrender with grace. You don't just end things, you bless them. You show the world that closing a door doesn't mean failure. It can mean fulfillment. You are not the end. You are the quiet hand that turns the page. And then there's something even more fascinating when we step back, because once you begin to explore the final digit of your birth year, not just as a standalone number, but as a symbol, you begin to notice something astonishing. Patterns. Patterns that repeat across decades. Patterns that link generations. Patterns that show up in who you love, how you dream, even how you fall apart and rebuild. These aren't just coincidences. Jung would have called them synchronicities, meaningful alignments that point to something deeper beneath the surface. The last digit of your birth year becomes a kind of fingerprint, not unique in the way a thumbprint is, but meaningful in the way a tone can shape a melody. Two people might both be 4s or 7s, but their lives will differ. Still, they may carry a shared soul frequency, a shared hunger, or fear, or capacity. When you look at the world through this lens, you don't see people in boxes. You see blueprints. You see symbols unfolding. The birth digits don't limit us. They're not fences. They're invitations. You begin to ask, what lessons did my decade carry? What echoes live in me that began before I was even born? And that's where things get poetic, because each generation carries emotional DNA. And that last digit might just be the breadcrumb that leads you back to understanding not just yourself, but your parents, your grandparents, even your children. Maybe you were born with a 9 at the end of your year. Maybe someone close to you was. Suddenly, you're not just decoding yourself, you're seeing others more clearly too. You're honoring what each digit brings, what each soul carries, what each path whispers. This isn't about control, it's about compassion. Because once you see life as layered with meaning, even in something as small as a number, you start to realize nothing is meaningless. Not your mistakes, not your timing, not even the year you were born. Let's now turn our focus to the most overlooked and arguably the most mystical of all the digits, the number 0, the soul of the number 0. If your birth year ends in 0, you were born with the spirit of the void walker. Not void in the sense of emptiness or absence, but in the way ancient mystics understood it, the womb of potential. You carry within you the sacred paradox, everything and nothing at once. Zeros are rare energies. They don't quite fit into fixed categories. In fact, they often resist them. While others seek definitions, labels, and identities, you intuitively know that who you are cannot be boxed in. You are a shapeshifter, a mirror, a silent space where others project their dreams, fears, and truths. You often feel like you're watching the world from just outside its frame, not disconnected, but observing with an otherworldly awareness. People may tell you that you're too aloof, too abstract, or too difficult to pin down, but that's because you don't belong to form. You belong to possibility. Zeros are born during periods of profound transformation. You are not only born into change, you are change. You carry the blueprint for a future that hasn't been fully imagined yet. Yours is the soul of beginnings after endings, of planting seeds in uncertain soil, of finding grace in the space between. But this too brings a challenge. When you identify too much with the void, you may forget that you still exist in a world that needs form. You might drift, avoid decisions, lose clarity in an ocean of infinite options. You may fear being defined because you think it will trap you, but remember, choosing a path doesn't limit your spirit. It gives it a place to dance. When a 0 finds their grounding, not in identity, but in intention, they become alchemists of reality. They don't just adapt to change, they sculpt it. They turn the unknown into innovation, silence into song, absence into presence. You don't follow the map, you draw it. When numbers collide, the psychology of pairing. But the story doesn't end with individual digits. In life, we are not islands, we are mirrors to each other. The last digit of your birth year exists in relationship with those around you. This dynamic can be as subtle as a shared emotional resonance, or as vivid as a lifelong theme of tension, transformation, or healing. Let's explore a few common numerical pairings. 0 and 5 often form compelling partnerships. The 0 brings grounding, an expansive sacred stillness, while the 5 offers wild motion, unpredictability, and the thrill of experience. When in balance, they generate evolution rooted in presence. When misaligned, the 0 might feel overwhelmed, and the 5 might feel trapped. But if they can honor their differences, they co-create lasting change. 1 and 6 frequently attract one another. The 1 is the initiator, the visionary pioneer who longs to break new ground. The 6 is the nurturer, offering emotional depth, loyalty, and care. Together, they form a union of purpose and support. However, tension arises when the 1's independence turns to selfishness, or when the 6 loses themselves in the role of caretaker. Their challenge is to move from codependency to co-creation. 2 and 7 meet in the realm of sensitivity and depth. The 2 yearns for emotional harmony, the sense of us. The 7 seeks inner wisdom, often through solitude. When they understand each other's needs, they form a dance between intimacy and introspection. But when fear enters, the 2 may feel abandoned, while the 7 feels smothered. The lesson: boundaries don't mean disconnection, they can be a bridge. 3 and 8 create a firework of creativity and ambition. The 3 brings color, expression, and emotional resonance. The 8 brings strategy, structure, and power. Together, they are a force of inspired execution. But if unbalanced, the 8 may try to control, while the 3 resists authority. Their task is to learn that expression and power are not rivals, they are allies. 4 and 9 build slowly but profoundly. The 4 provides foundation and discipline. The 9 carries emotional intelligence and a spiritual overview. They are both here for legacy, for creating things that outlast them. Their relationship may feel heavy, even karmic, but when grounded in mutual respect, they are the architects of compassion. These combinations are not fixed outcomes. They are psychological invitations, calls to understand the emotional languages we speak and the soul frequencies we carry. By now, you've heard the whispers of each number. Perhaps you've recognized yourself in one or many. But let me leave you with this truth. These numbers are not cages. They don't predict your fate. They are maps. But you are the traveler. What the final digit of your birth year offers is not a rulebook, but a mirror. A moment to pause and say, so that's part of why I move the way I do. It's the beginning of compassion, not just for yourself, but for the people around you. Carl Jung believed that numbers held a mystical quality because they transcend language. They speak directly to the unconscious. And when we give ourselves permission to interpret them symbolically, we tap into a well of deep self-awareness, not bound by labels, but rooted in recognition. You are not just your job, your habits, your history. You are a symbol unfolding. And sometimes, even the smallest symbol, like the final digit of a birth year, can help you remember you are a story worth decoding.